Peace be upon you. Welcome to the What Does Science Say channel. You know, history is one of those things we think we have a pretty good handle on. But what if I told you that some of the biggest stories, the ones we all learned in school, are just, well, completely wrong?
Okay, let's jump right in with a big one. Just picture it. The Great Pyramids of Giza, rising from the desert. What's the first image that comes to mind? Probably thousands of slaves toiling away under the hot sun, right? It's one of the most stubborn myths in all of history. But the truth? Oh, the truth is so much more interesting. So, in this explainer, we're going to set a few things straight. First, we'll tackle some of those massive myths from the ancient world. Then, we'll take a fresh look at our own ancestors and how they really lived. After that, we'll explore how we get maps and even countries all wrong. And finally, we'll get to the heart of why digging for the truth really matters. All right, first up, lies of the ancients. And yeah, we're starting with those magnificent pyramids. That whole story about slave labor, it's just plain wrong. Now, slavery did exist in ancient Egypt, no doubt, but slaves were usually put to work on simpler tasks, like farming. Building the pyramids? That was a high-tech job for its time. It was a national project fueled by money and pride, and it attracted the absolute best engineers, artists, and craftsmen from all over the kingdom. And yes, they were paid for their work. And get this, the level of precision they were working with is just mind-blowing. For some of these massive stone blocks, an error of just 1/10 of a millimeter, a fraction of a human hair, could have compromised the entire structure. You don't entrust that kind of mission-critical work to unwilling, untrained labor. You need professionals who take immense pride in what they do. Okay, so let's jump from the pyramids to the bloody sands of the Roman Colosseum. Thanks to Hollywood, we picture these brutal fights to the death, with the emperor's thumbs down sealing someone's fate. But the reality? It was much more like a modern combat sport. Gladiators were highly valuable athletes, and the main goal was to entertain the crowd, not necessarily to kill each other. Most fights actually ended when one person surrendered or couldn't continue.
Exactly. These fighters were huge investments. Killing them was just bad for business. Most of the deaths that did happen were from things like uncontrolled bleeding after a serious injury, not a dramatic public execution. Okay, now speaking of drama, what about the most famous trick play in all of military history?
The Trojan horse. It's such an epic tale, right? Greek soldiers hiding in a giant wooden horse to sneak into Troy. The thing is, it's just that, a tale, an incredible story. Most historians agree that the Trojan War, as it's described, is an influential myth, not a factual account. Even Homer, the guy credited with writing it, is a legendary figure himself. It's fantastic storytelling, but it's not history.
Let's move on and bring things a little closer to home. In this next section, we're going to look at some deep-seated myths we have about ourselves, about our ancestors.
You've definitely heard this one before. People in the Middle Ages had super short lives, right? The average lifespan was only about 30 years old. And while that number is technically floating around, it tells a really, really misleading story.
See, here's the catch. That average is dragged way, way down by the tragically high rates of infant and child mortality back then. It wasn't that 30-year-olds were just dropping dead all over the place. If you were fortunate enough to make it through the dangerous years of childhood, you actually had a pretty good shot at living to be 60 or even 70 years old. Now for another huge one. We have all seen that classic image of an ape that slowly stands up taller and taller until it becomes a human. But the idea that we evolved from the monkeys or chimpanzees that are alive today, that's a total misunderstanding of how evolution actually works. The reality is a much longer, more complex journey. Think of it like a family tree. Humans and modern apes share a common ancestor that lived millions of years ago. We're cousins. After that common ancestor, our evolutionary paths split. Our branch went through all these different stages over millions of years, eventually leading to us. It was a long, winding road, not a straight line from chimp to human.
So let's pivot from the story of our entire species to the tragic story of one individual.
The brilliant painter Vincent van Gogh. The story of his madness is almost as famous as his art. He cut off his whole ear in a fit of passion and gave it to his lover. Or did he?
Yeah, this popular story is a massive oversimplification of a really sad reality. First, he only cut off a piece of his earlobe, not the whole ear. Second, he gave it to a sex worker at a brothel, not some great love of his life. And most importantly, this wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It was a tragic symptom of the severe mental illness that tortured him for most of his life.
And the real tragedy here is that this absolute genius died in poverty at the age of 37. He sold almost nothing during his entire lifetime. His incredible work was only recognized after he was already gone.
And that number? $117 million. That's the price one of his paintings sold for in 2022. It really shows you how much our perceptions and labels matter. Which actually is the perfect lead-in to our next section, where we'll look at how we mislabel our whole world. Here is a classic myth. Everyone in the Middle Ages thought the Earth was flat, and Christopher Columbus was this brave genius who had to fight against all the ignorant naysayers. The truth? Any educated person for the last 2,500 years has known the Earth is a sphere. The ancient Greeks proved it.
And this knowledge was not just locked away in Europe. During the Islamic Golden Age, some of the world's leading astronomers and mathematicians, like these brilliant thinkers right here, they didn't just know the Earth was round. They were making incredibly precise calculations based on that fact. This idea that everyone thought the Earth was flat is basically a fiction made up in the 1800s.
Misconceptions aren't just about science. They pop up in geography and politics too. For instance, there's this common belief that the name Iran is a modern invention, something Reza Shah Pahlavi just came up with in the 1930s.
But he didn't invent it at all. He simply asked the international community to stop using the name Persia, which was a name given to them by foreigners, and to start using the country's correct historical name, Iran. And this kind of thing is more common than you think. Turkey recently did the same thing, asking people to stop calling it Turkey. Czechia did it too. And then you have countries like Germany, which its own people call Deutschland, that have never bothered to ask for a change.
In fact, the name Iran is ancient. It comes from the Avesta and means land of the nobles, and it's been in use for over 2,500 years. All of this brings us to our final, and I think most important section.
So, after debunking all these myths, from pyramids to gladiators to our own ancestors, you might be asking, so what? What's the point? The point is this. Understanding our real, complex, and often misunderstood past helps us appreciate the single most astonishing fact of all, your own existence. Look at that number, 1 in 400 trillion. That is the mathematical probability of you being born, of one specific sperm cell from your father meeting one specific egg from your mother to create the unique individual that is you. When you truly grasp the sheer improbability of your own life and the long, complicated history that had to unfold perfectly for you to even be here, it puts everything into perspective. Questioning history isn't just about being a trivia champion, it's about understanding the profound, astronomical value of every single life. Thank you for being with us until the end of this video. Please be sure to subscribe to the What Does Science Say channel and give us energy with your likes and comments. Share your comments with us and send the video to your loved ones so that others can also use it.